Hello chess fans, today I'm going to be doing another tournament recap video. You can join the tournament at the first link in the description. So I'm going to start off with a game that I find a little bit hard to show. It's a game that I lost and it was a huge rating disparity. I am rated 2500 Lead Chess Rapid and my opponent was only rated 1900 Lead Chess Rapid. But as we can see in my game, my opponent played an excellent game and I didn't play as precisely as possible and my opponent managed to get the better of me. So my opponent started off with d4, knight f6, c4, e6, knight c3. And so I decided to go for the Nimzo Indian. And the Nimzo Indian is a very aggressive opening as black and often can be said to lead to wins. So my opponent goes for a3. Now a3 it's a line, but it's not a very respected line because it's pretty much a worse version of the f3 variation. Or sorry, not f4, the f3 variation looking to play e4. The idea of this is you get the bishop first, but a3 seems like a waste of a move, and here after c5, black is generally doing better. And that's what I saw in this game. I was playing very badly today, even in the previous game. But my opponent goes queen c2, which is a pretty bad move. Either you have two plans here to go e3, and on e3, there's two problems. There's knight c6, e4, and the idea to go d6 and e5, or white can immediately punish you with d4, and this is a line that transposes to f3 Nimzo. Or white can decide to get the ideal setup, go with e3, bishop d3, knight e2, g3, and go for e4 when they see fit. But my opponent goes for queen c2, which doesn't go for either of these, and kind of just blunders this move knight c6. Because now, the whole idea with queen c2 was to play e4, but now we have to play e3, which also blocks in our bishop. So here, black would be much better, so I castled. The best move apparently here was to go b6 and try to go for the pawn immediately. But castles, knight f3, d6. And my opponent goes g3. Again, this doesn't really make sense because the bishop had a nice home here. And as you can see, the engine says it's a mistake. I decide to go for e5, attacking the center, and my opponent goes for d5. And here the engine recommends something so ridiculous that I challenge anyone to find it. So the best move here is, it's extremely hard to find, and the idea is e4. And the reason why I thought this was unplayable is because I thought my opponent would go for knight d2, attacking the pawn. And here, black is supposed to play knight e5, and after takes, it seems like black is just down a full pawn, and I didn't see any compensation here. But apparently black is winning after bishop g4, bishop g2, and rook e8. And there's no way to stop knight f3 check, winning the queen. Extremely hard to see. And even still, you would think that king f1 might save the piece, but after queen f6, there's still no way to save the position, and this position is completely winning. So ridiculous to see. Knight a5 is a completely natural move, and I think most players would play this. So here, white went for e4, b6, knight d2. Again, this is not a very good move because you blocked in the bishop. Maybe first play bishop e3 or play h3 so that knight bishop e3 is not met by g4. Here, bishop a6. I think bishop h6 makes sense. King h8 is the best move, but I mean, who's going to play king h8? Queen d7. The idea is twofold. First off, I wanted to go, if castles, I wanted to go queen d7, knight g4. And the other idea is that if, for example, if they castle again, this would be winning, but I'd go for, if they move their queen off this diagonal somehow, I could go for queen a4 and attack this pawn. Again, this is a common idea in these sorts of positions. So my opponent went for h3, stopping my queen from getting in, which was a great move, and here I went for knight e8. The engine likes to play g6, but that's just to keep more flexible. So knight e8, king f1, and here I do play g6 with the idea to go knight g7 and f5. King g2, knight g7. So here, up to this point, me and my opponent have been playing decently well. Black here is significantly better because all of my pieces are better and this bishop is very bad. So here I go rook d8. The idea was I could move my queen in the future. For example, it could go to a4 or it could support f5 after takes, and I didn't want any knight e4 to come with the attack on the d6 pawn. So after rook a8, g4, king h8, I want to play f5, but I don't want my king on the g file. Queen e2, this doesn't really do anything. Here I play f5, and my opponent plays knight f1. And so now here, I had an opportunity to get a very big advantage with the move knight f3. And after here, takes, I had this with a double attack. And white is just a little bit too slow here because no matter what knight move they play, something is going to fall. I didn't say this, instead I took immediately. And this was because I thought it simply transposed, but this gives us less flexibility. So I went for knight b3. I wanted to play rook f4, but I couldn't play rook f4 because the bishop takes. So first I had to get rid of the bishop. And this is their good bishop since their pawns were on the light squares. Here I played rook f4. I think this is incredibly natural. The best move is apparently to go bishop b7. What this does is sort of beyond me. So rook f4 is extremely natural. Queen e2, rook df8, and here my opponent goes f3. And now was my final chance to pretty much win the game. After this, I made a lot of inaccuracies and ended up losing the game. So here what I should probably do, and it was probably easiest, is to take, and after queen takes, to take here, the king will clearly take back, and after queen f7 check, the queen is just actually getting in. For example, if king g2, queen f4 with a double attack. And here the whole idea was that all of white's pieces are terrible, and all of black's pieces are good, even though the two rooks are better than the queen. So here black would be completely winning. I didn't see that. Instead, I played knight e8 with the idea to go to f6 because I didn't see any future for the knight on g7. Knight d2, my opponent looked for e4. I completely missed this move. Knight f6, I wanted to take. For example, if knight e4 takes would be completely winning for black because white has just too many weaknesses and the f-file is in control of black, is in black's control. So in queen f4, I'm not threatening to take this because they could win the bishop, but they defend it anyways. King g7, rook hf1, just defending the pawn. And here, what you should probably do is realize that this pawn is never going to fall. But I really wanted that pawn to fall. So I came up with a ridiculous maneuver to go knight g8, knight h6, knight f7, knight d8, knight b7, knight a5. And I don't know why I thought this would work, because if we look at it, is incredibly slow. And even if I got all the way there, my queen would probably have to move back to defend the pawn after knight e4. So I immediately blundered with knight g8, which blunders the game back to equal. After knight e4, queen d7, knight g5, there's no way to defend against knight e6. So I have to sack. I decide to sack this rook, and now the position is about equal. And now, even though the position is about equal, I think nobody on earth would take white here because black has these huge pawns in the center, and white, of course, has these terrible pieces as well as these doubled pawns. So now in this position, I was pretty much thinking that I would just win the game easily. I was already just a little bit disillusioned because I played the previous game very badly as well. And then this game came and I just blundered once. I was like, okay, it happens. Now, I was just thinking it would be an easy win from here. All I had to go is knight e7, knight c6, knight d5, which was my original plan. My opponent goes rook a d1, and immediately I blunder with knight e7. And the whole reason why this is a blunder is because the knight kind of just gets in the way, and there will always be this sort of pin. Now, what black really should do is go knight h6 to go knight f7 to keep it solid, and then take this pawn in the future. And the knight f7 is really important in protecting the center. Knight e7, huge mistake. Rook fe1. And now here, I completely didn't notice that this rook would possibly be hanging in the future, and I go knight c6, which is a huge blunder because after queen d2, they have the double threat to go bishop e4, threatening the pawn and the knight, but also to take the rook. And I saw one of these threats, and it was not the one on the rook. I played knight a5, and my opponent took the queen, the rook, and here I resign. So this is how you would beat a player that's 600 points rated higher than you. Just sort of play fast. What my opponent did here was they tried to play as quickly as possible. I ended up making a lot of mistakes. We got into this closed position. You don't have to try to outplay your opponent in the opening. More than likely, as we saw here, I was completely winning in the opening. Anyone would take black's position here. But the way my opponent won was by holding on, keeping a fighting spirit, and not overestimating their chances. So now let's go into the next game. This was a game in round 1 between a 1700 and a 2200. 2200 played black, and we see what I think is very instructive, the center fork trick. And a lot of people are confused at how to sort of win these positions, and I think this game is a great example of how you sort of win this position as black. So here white played bishop takes d5. Now they really should go bishop d3 and after takes. Here black has a ridiculous move. If you're under 2000, don't even consider this move. The ridiculous move knight b4. And knight b4 is supposed to be slightly better for black because you're threatening f5, e4, and you don't allow bishop takes c6. Very hard to see. So instead bishop takes, queen takes, and here they went d3. Here they should clearly go knight c3, getting a tempo on the queen. So d3, bishop f5. Bishop f5, maybe a little bit over ambitious. I would have gone for bishop g4, but the engine really likes bishop f5. Queen e2, castle's queen side is very good. Bishop g4 made more sense to me because then you also threaten knight d4, and you also still want to castle queen side. And here black played bishop b3, which doesn't really make any sense. They should really castle their king. Knight d4, takes with an attack on the rook. And here black is just completely winning, bishop e4, and there's no way to defend this. And here black was up a pawn and converted the game excellently, and now here this would be mate. You often don't see a fianchettoed rook. So now let's go into the next game between 2200 as white and 2000 as black. So white started off with e4, and we see accelerated dragon. And so we see d4. Now my favorite line against the accelerated dragon, this particular move order, instead of with knight c6 first, and I think something that gives black a lot of problems, is this move c3. And you might say, doesn't this look like an Alpine Sicilian? It's not really an Alpine Sicilian because after this, black basically gets white gets a perfect Alpine Sicilian. They have the two pawns in the center against the Sicilian, and this position is considered to be pretty much winning for the white piece is d5 here. And a lot of people think that after bishop g4, this position is unpleasant. They think this position is unpleasant for black or for white, but it really is just a very nice advantage. And for example, you even have ideas of going knight b2 after bishop g4, and if they ever take on d4, you have this queen a4 discovery. So instead, after this, they play d4. And here, another really cool line is to go queen takes d4, attacking the rook, and after knight f6, you can go e5. And here this gets into a lot of theory, but white is also on top against here. So I don't recommend going for d4 or c4 against this particular variation of the dragon. Okay, so here white decides to go for a sort of tame variation, which they don't have any advantage, but they didn't really care for any advantage. And black decides to make a medium mistake. They pretty much just allow e4, e5 for no reason. And white completely misses the chance to play e5. And here the black thought they had the center fork trick, but obviously white can go back. Now white could have also gone bishop d4, and this would have also been very good for white. So bishop e3, and now we see basically the sort of usual Sicilian endgame. Black will have these weak pawns on this side of the board, but they'll have this majority in the center that they'll try to push. And usually white is much better in these endgames, and white is also more developed in this particular position. So we'll see how white takes care of this. So white decides to go for bishop f4. Not the best move. They should really go for bishop c5, e5, and yeah, they completely forgot about the pin here. Oops. So rook e1, keep the pin. Here white consolidates up a pawn. White slowly gets their position to be better and better, and then here they trap the bishop. And the rest of this game is a little bit of history. So a very nice dismantling by the 2200 of the 2000. So our final game is between a 2070 as white and an 1860 as black. So white decides to go for what I think is a very trendy line. Not a trendy line, but a very funny line. One of my favorite lines, and I think this is highly respectable. They go for this in some sort of casual tournament. So knight c6 to defend the pawn. So you have to defend the pawn because the queen attacked here and here. So now we see bishop c4, and I do have a video on this. g6 to protect the mate. Queen f3 still threatening the mate, and knight f6. And this is just a super fun variation, but immediately white blunders. So the reason why we don't play d3, we have to play knight e2 first, is to stop this knight d4 move. After d3, black has knight d4, and after here, they have d5. And here black would be completely winning because they have mutual threats of bishop d4. They have mutual threats of exploding the center. They're way up on development, and white just made 1, 2, 3 queen moves. Instead, after knight e2, white isn't much worse at all. White is probably here on the slightly worse side of equality, though. Bishop d3, white doesn't notice it. Black again doesn't notice it. Black again doesn't notice it, and now finally black finally notices and goes after queen d1. And now here, I think black played a little bit too slowly. What black should do here is go with the ridiculous move b5. And then after bishop b3, they can go a5, c3, and get rid of this knight with tempo. So here in the game, we would see that black lost the full tempo getting rid of the knight. Here black decided to go for c6, but after c3, the knight has nowhere to go and can't take the bishop. So bishop takes e6, f takes d takes e6. Obviously, I think f takes e6 would be here slightly superior because you also threaten d5 and you open up the file for your rook. But black decides to play d takes e6. This bishop is also very bad either way. So here we see that this pawn is sort of weak, g5, and black decides to pick up the bishop pair. And here black has the bishop pair, but they have a very overcommitted structure, and so the position is a roughly equal. So queen b3, black decides to castle queenside, and they immediately lose this pawn. So here they should have probably gone queen a6, but I guess they didn't like the fact that after takes their pawn structure would be completely crippled. And they also blundered this fork. So after queen c7, queen takes a6, white just got a very nice advantage here by having the open king. This position was actually +7 here with the simple move knight bc check. And after queen c7, queen a3, and there's simply no way to get out of this discovered check. But instead, white decides to go for queen a5 first, and the rest of this conversion was pretty simple. White is just up a pawn, trades a bunch of pieces, and black couldn't really do much for the rest of the game until they blundered a fork with b4. So that's the end of today's video, guys. If you like this sort of video, please remember to leave a like and subscribe. If you want to join the tournament, please click the first link in the description. And I apologize for this video being slightly late. It is sometimes hard to recap games that you lost, especially when I don't think I played at a level that I usually would. So I'll see you guys in the next one.